Hello. Today I will be interviewing Wynton Marsalis, a legendary jazz trumpeter. Welcome, Wynton.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So I've got a few questions for you. Beginning with, when did you start playing jazz?
Ooh. Well, my father, Ellis, was a jazz musician, but I wasn't really into playing jazz right at the beginning. I was more into sports. I played all kind of sports from a young age. And seeing my father struggle financially and give what little money he had to support our family, it made me doubt music and jazz as a whole. So I wasn't really sold on the idea at first of becoming a musician. But at the age of 8, I finally started to pick up some music and play a few places here and there. And then I really fell in love with jazz at the age of 12 by listening to artists like John Coltrane. And in my early teens, I picked up the trumpet and really had a passion for it. And started playing in school bands and built a relationship with my band director at my high school, and really started to pursue music as a career.
Very nice. So you talked about living in New Orleans with your musical family. How did that background affect your rise to prominence?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, my father Ellis was a jazz musician himself, so I was already accustomed to jazz music and music as a whole. My family really encouraged it. My parents took the 6 of us to music lessons from a young age, and they really encouraged studying what we wanted to do and making sure we developed an interest in the arts. And growing up in New Orleans obviously played a big role in my interest in jazz. New Orleans was kind of where jazz was first established, and I think the culture of the city really helped me understand its roots and helped me to appreciate the genre a lot more. And then also, just growing up in the South, people could be kind of cruel, and I don't know, I got picked on sometimes, and I think that really helped me build up my self-esteem and figure out what was wrong with my sound and my style and help me work on my craft. And it instilled in me this drive to try and succeed at playing the trumpet a little bit more.
Cool. So even at that early age, did you know you were a prodigy? Did you know you'd be making a living playing the trumpet?
Well, I still don't think of myself as a prodigy today. I think of myself as just a hard worker who had a lot of love for the art of jazz. Music as a whole, and I think jazz especially, even if you have a little bit of music talent to start out, I think it takes 3 or 4 years of really hard work to even break through in the industry at all, and a lot of times even more than that. It's not something that is a matter of being a prodigy or not. I think what really defines good musicians is just hard work. But yeah, to answer your second question, I never thought that I would be a professional musician, had any impact on the industry at all. I mean, I had a lot of teachers who inspired me to want to succeed, like John Longo and Danny Barker, but I never thought that like what they were saying about my talent would actually become a matter of me making a living out of my instrument.
Very interesting. So you've always been very proud of your heritage. Did you go into your career knowing that you would integrate the discussion of diversity so openly into it?
Yes, I think to a degree I did, but I think I was more about showing that every human has human qualities about them that transcend ethnic identity. I'm very proud of my heritage, and I know that jazz formed from African American roots. But I think what's more important is to understand that we all have core human values that are apparent beyond that of the color of our skin and race. And I think that's more what I wanted to do, was make more of a human statement rather than a racial statement. But I know race is a very big problem in our nation as a whole, and it's very apparent within jazz. And I think that we need to overcome this racial tension to better thrive as a country. And it's something that we have to be honest about and acknowledge. And I think we are making slow progress, but I think it's something that kind of plagues our nation.
So, in your opinion, why is jazz about race?
I think jazz is definitely about race because it was born from the African American culture. Jazz is essentially derived from Creole, slave songs, operas, and eventually a lot of those things led to blues, which is fundamental in American music, especially jazz. And most jazz musicians are African American, and the genre was basically formed from African American culture. Although I think jazz music is not inherently African American by any means. I think that anybody can play jazz music. It's not specifically an African American genre. And I think, like I said before, that music transcends ethnic identity and it's more about fundamental human value. So it's more about what an individual person can bring to the style of music you're playing rather than what race it is about.
So, given that anyone can play jazz, how do you think the deep diversity in the industry has shaped jazz?
I think that jazz has really helped bring white people and black people together more so than any other genre. The very first time I saw black and white adults mixed together was at a jazz concert. And I think that when jazz was in its early stages, a lot of African American musicians on the street would be playing, and white children would come up and see these people that their parents had told them were inferior playing music and feel rather intimidated into it, instilled a sense of competition in them that drove jazz music to a whole other level. White musicians would join in and try to be better than their African American counterparts, and that it just kind of created this competition that led jazz to be a national phenomenon. And in addition, I think that jazz kind of gave African Americans some notoriety that they didn't see before. White people saw how talented black people could be, and I think it gave a lot of African Americans a lot of confidence that they didn't have before. And I think diversity also in the industry just makes jazz music a lot richer than it would normally be. It draws from more cultures, more perspectives, and it just makes the sound a lot more interesting. And I think that the diversity and different races within jazz also help encourage a lot of the music and the emotion within different pieces. Like my piece, Blood on the Fields, which won the 1997 Pulitzer Prize for music. It was basically inspired by an African American couple fleeing from slavery and trying to reach freedom, and it really encouraged the whole oratorio and the sound of that. And I don't think I would have been inspired to have written that piece if it wasn't for diversity within jazz.
Okay. So the legacy of jazz seems very important to you. Why do you value educating young musicians so much?
Well, I think education is a privilege. I am really grateful for the education I received, and I'm really happy that my parents had me take different music lessons when I was a kid. And I think that education allows people to explore different areas that they normally wouldn't have been exposed to. I think music education can help students realize their passion for music and playing different instruments. And I think that music education could potentially help America find more jazz greats like Louis Armstrong and Duke Ellington. And I think that one of the biggest problems with our country right now is that so many young people don't really know what music means, what it means to be a musician, and how music feeds the soul.
So, speaking of young musicians, what do you see for the future of jazz?
I think right now we have to keep remembering jazz's legacy as well as remember that jazz has a future and that it's going to keep progressing. I think we as jazz musicians hold a responsibility to the genre to remember its roots and remember what it means, but also know that it's going to keep progressing and changing. But we also have to remember to not let the genre stray too far from its original path. And I think that jazz's future looks really bright as long as schools in different parts of the country keep producing driven, talented, and passionate jazz musicians who keep thinking of new, innovative ways to keep improving the genre as a whole. And I think that as long as these musicians remember what jazz is all about and remember what it means to our nation, that the future looks very bright.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for talking to me, Wynton.
You're very welcome.
It was a pleasure.